Greg's favorite time of year is finally here. It's the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Wrestling Show. The schedule is out, so we now have some clarity about when and where you can see the Nittany Lions wrestling in the 2025-2026 regular season. And of course, major commitment to the program, so we're going to get into all of that for the class of 2027. Greg Pickle, we were off for a little bit here with a lot of stuff going on, but of course with wrestling warming up and the news starting to flow, we're into the preseason with all of the things happening that we just outlined that we're going to talk about today. Where's your mindset with this team as we head into all of that?
Yeah, it's good to be back with you on the wrestling show, T. Frank. I was thinking on the flight home from Penn State football's loss to UCLA that there's probably a lot of people who could use some good news about Penn State athletics. And so Penn State wrestling tends to provide that, has for the majority of the Cale Sanderson era. And even since that flight back across the United States, there's been some more news that has come Penn State wrestling's way that's been good. So for the Nittany Lions, they are looking to, again, obviously defend their NCAA title. They will have a chance to become the team that has the longest consecutive dual meet winning streak, which we'll talk about in addition to the entirety of this year's schedule a little bit later in the show. And they're doing some recruiting work right now as we talk, trying to get ready for, future seasons as they, of course, prepare for the one coming up that's right around the corner.
So do you want to start with the recruiting? Do you want to start with the schedule? What do you think is the most important news here for Penn State fans? Because some is immediate, some is long-term. And so I want to gauge what you think is the most pertinent here for us to get into.
Yeah, let's start with the recruiting. I think that, we'll get a little bit more in-depth in the schedule here in a bit. But I think that if you look at what Penn State wrestling fans are talking about right now, they are pumped about where things stand for the class of 2027. So let's get the bad news out of the way first. Or maybe it's not bad news, but notable news at the very least. Bo Bassett and Melvin Miller, top class of 2026 and 2027 prospects out of Johnstown. Bishop McCourt, both committed to Virginia Tech over the weekend. That happened more or less as the Penn State football team was imploding in the first half. So in case you missed it during the football game and then decided that you weren't going to get on any form of the internet afterwards, which I don't really blame anyone if they did that. But if you're not aware or didn't see it, Penn State, of course, had those two guys in mind. Will not be getting them here. But they did get two 2027 recruits since we last had a show. So the first one, T. Frank, is Gavin Magano. So Gavin Magano is a class of 2027 recruit who committed to Penn State recently. I don't have the date in front of me at the moment, but committed to Penn State recently, a New York guy, KD Training Center guy, very talented wrestler. He is not in Matt Scout's latest pound-for-pound rankings, but he is number 5 in its 138-pound rankings. He could wrestle as high as 174 in college. I don't know if he will, but he's not a guy. I think he'll probably settle into the middleweights, like somewhere between 149 and 165. But I don't think going up to even 174 is completely out of the question. So Penn State Wrestling landed him recently, and then on Monday, this past Monday, October 6th, Landon Sidun, Norwin, PA native, standout wrestler from the western part of Pennsylvania, picked Penn State over a number of other schools who he had visited, including Pitt. I think the writing had been on the wall that Sidun was at some point going to end up being a Penn State, a member of the Penn State class of 2025. He took an official visit for the whiteout game, and Penn State then got the decision over the finish line a week and change later. So really good prospect here, T. Frank, number 1 at 120 pounds in Matt Scout's rankings, and number 14 overall in the pound-for-pound rankings. He told me over the summer that he thinks he's a career 125-pounder. So, when Luke Lilledall's time is up at Penn State, which will be here before we know it, of course, it would be a chance, I think, for Sidun to potentially slot right in. Of course, Penn State will have other 25-pounders and 33-pounders that will be in that conversation as well. But super talented guy. He's going to be at Who's Number 1 this coming weekend. I think that's somewhere in Iowa. He will also be at Super 32. It's notable not only because he will have a chance to validate and possibly even improve where he is at in the rankings, but his season ended as a sophomore early because of a broken hand or hand injury. That kept him off the mat for the postseason, which was a bummer for him, bummer for his team. And I think we would have saw him do some more stuff this summer on the freestyle scene had he been healthy enough to do so. So back in action, good news for him. He told me in August that he's healthy, feeling good. That continues to be the case. And we'll have an interview with him at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com at some point this week, breaking down why he picked Penn State. But I think it's pretty obvious. In-state guy, very good wrestler who wanted to come to Penn State, and now he will.
All right. Well, some good news there. Some obviously very good news for Penn State wrestling. And then a little bit of a downer with the Bassett news and the Melvin Miller news. But the good news is now we know where Penn State is going to be wrestling. We know the BJC duels. We know the home duels. So let's get into that and get your highlights, some things that I just want to get your opinion on how this is working out starting in November. Oklahoma at the BJC. Big way to start the non-conference. So what do you think of that? And what do you think of like the schedule overall?
Yeah, so Penn State will start and end. Well, not start and end, but almost, or definitely start and almost end. I've been thinking about the right way to phrase that all morning and just blew it. But point being, Penn State's going to start its season at the Bryce Jordan Center, as you mentioned, when Oklahoma comes to town for a non-conference match. And then the last time they compete in State College will be the Big Ten Championships, which are coming to the Bryce Jordan Center in March of next year. So in some ways, Penn State will start and end its season outside of nationals in Cleveland at the BJC. So interesting match there. Oklahoma's going to bring some ranked guys to town. Penn State, of course, will be favored. It's one of two events for the Lions in November, with the other being the all too familiar Army Black Knight Invitational, which has turned into something of a wrestle-off if Penn State needs it. And we'll see which guys end up going to that. And, we'll be watching closely for whether Ono, the standout Japanese wrestler who is now at Penn State and could be a guy at 133 or 141 this year. We're still waiting to find out about that and if he's in the lineup, but will be interesting to see. Certainly we'd expect him to go to that no matter what. So how many guys, especially in those weights that look contested, go to the Black Knight, and how do they perform against each other if they get to wrestle? So curious to see that, T. Frank. Moving into December, Penn State's going to be on the road 4 times in December. They'll be at Drexel on the 5th of December, host Lehigh on the 7th, and then be at Wyoming on the 13th, and at the National or Collegiate Wrestling Duels on the 20th. They're going to face Stanford and North Dakota State. Why is that one highlighted, T. Frank? Because if Penn State wins its dual matches prior to that trip, it is there that it could break the currently held record by Oklahoma State of 76 consecutive dual meet victories by winning its 77th in a row at that event on December 20th. So there was a time where I thought, wow, it's going to get overshadowed potentially by Penn State football and a possible college football playoff game on that same weekend. Don't got to worry about that anymore. So
No.
Penn State wrestling will look to make some headlines on December 20th if it gets through the rest of its dual meets. Before that, unscathed as expected. Then January comes, T. Frank, and we all know what that means. It is Big Ten portion of the schedule time in January always. It's going to start on January 10th when Rutgers comes to town, and then a double dual weekend at Iowa and at Northwestern follows before another double dual weekend at home and away, where they're going to split. They'll have Indiana at Rec Hall and then be at Maryland. Nebraska comes to the BJC on the 30th of January. And then to wrap things up, February is going to be at Michigan on the 6th. Back in the BJC to welcome Ohio State to town on the 13th. And then Princeton comes to Rec Hall to close out the season on the regular season anyway, on the 20th. So the question mark here, there's a couple. There's 3 Penn State BJC dual meets. Why did they want to do that? We'll hear what Cale Sanderson has to say about that at the team's media day later this week. Later this month, rather. Excuse me about that. There's certainly not media day on October 8th for a season that starts on November 14th. But, we'll be interested to see what the thought process there was. It didn't look like there was any scheduling conflicts. You can imagine, obviously, the 2 Big Ten opponents, but having Oklahoma there is kind of interesting. So we'll see what went into that decision-making process. And then from there, it's about just, the lineup. So we know who Penn State's going to wrestle this year, but as we've seen in the past, the lineup you might see, T. Frank, when Oklahoma comes to town could be different than the one you see in the Big Ten portion of the schedule that starts with Rutgers. So fun schedule for Penn State. I think the the non-conference dual meet list is really strong. I think it's really interesting, and I know that maybe some fans would have liked to see a state after that Oklahoma, but Penn State is not going to wrestle Oklahoma State, so it is the Oklahoma Sooners.
Yeah, to start the year, absolutely not.
Yeah, and beyond that, I think the Lehigh. I did a ranking of the non-conference matches over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. I had Princeton at number 6, the annual senior night or senior day match against a lesser non-conference opponent is probably the best way to put it. Certainly is one that will be watched closely, and we've seen some craziness and not good ways, like injuries, happen at those in past years. So Penn State will try to avoid that. But I had that at number 6, and I had Lehigh at number 1. I think that Lehigh match is always competitive. There's usually more bouts that are ranked versus ranked wrestlers than people realize because the final score is usually pretty lopsided. I'm not saying it won't be again this year, but I do think that there is little doubt in my mind that this may be the most competitive top to bottom, assuming everyone wrestles as expected, matchup between the Lions and the Mountain Hawks that we've seen. And then number 2 on my list, T. Frank, was that collegiate wrestling duels trip. Not only because I think it's important. Penn State does it for a reason, right? Cale Sanderson and the staff does everything for a reason. And the reason for that one is to get these guys another opportunity, like with the double dual weekend, to have to manage your weight, manage your energy, so on and so forth, with multiple matches in a single day. So that one was number 2 on the list, and you can check out the rest over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But yeah, glad we have the schedule out. The next thing to watch for T. Frank is going to be the Big Ten Network schedule for the 2025-2026 season. So as we record this on October 8th, the Big Ten Network announced the men's and women's basketball TV schedule and tip times on the 7th, Tuesday, October 7th. So wrestling ones usually come a little bit later than that, usually like the middle of October. So I think we might still be a couple weeks away from those. But you never know, which is why you should always be checking out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for the latest on Penn State wrestling. But yeah, that's where we're at, T. Frank. The next thing on the schedule outside of that is going to be U23 World Championships, which are a couple weeks away now. And obviously a very heavy Penn State contingent. One other thing I want to note, the NWCA All-Star Classic bout lineup is out. No Penn State wrestlers at that event, which will be at Rutgers this year. It's been in State College previously. I think the number of Penn State wrestlers that are at U23s is probably the main reason why this event was moved from State College to Rutgers, or at least one of them. And then, Penn State won't have anyone there. Who could have went, you ask? Shane Van Ness, I think, was obviously an option. He is not competing on the U23 team. But other than that, I mean, you probably could have sent Rocco Welsh there. I think people would have bought into that. But, he's a U23 guy as well. I'm pretty sure. I shouldn't have this memorized by now, but I get confused with my numbers. Between U20, Senior Worlds, he is. So, I mean, outside of Shane Van Ness, I'm not sure who Penn State would have sent to that event. So, it is what it is. Hope it goes well at Rutgers and for the sport of wrestling. But it felt like that should be noted as well, that no Penn State wrestlers on the NWCA All-Star Classic bout sheet this year. And so, that's where we're at, T. Frank. The Penn State wrestling season is less than 40 days away. And as the football team continues to struggle, I think people will look forward to that even more than they usually do. During the Cale Sanderson era of success at Penn State.
So you mentioned something there that I wanted to follow up on when you said that the lineup could look very different from the first time that they're, at the BJC the last time. I guess how much? Like, what are you looking at there in terms of places, just as an early season preview of places that you think Penn State's going to use the non-conference to figure some things out?
Yeah, so, I think there's just so many questions about a lot of different parts of this lineup. You have Lucas Cochran back for another season, presumably to challenge Cole Mirasola at heavyweight. So those guys are going to get a chance for that spot. We know that Rocco Welsh is obviously coming into this lineup for Penn State. So there's, without question, there's some spots that are set. Messenbrink's spot set. Levi Haynes' spot is set. Luke Lilledal's spot is set. We assume is set. Josh Barr is set at 97. So the questions really come at 33 and 41. If you look at the rankings, the expectation is that Marcus Blaze, the freshman phenom, will go at 33, and that Braden Davis will bump up from 33 to wrestle at 141. You have Ono coming in, as we mentioned, and what does Penn State decide to do with him in his first season as a college wrestler? Aaron Nagao is back and could fit into 133 or 141 after missing last year due to injury. Then you have the question, of course, of PJ Duke battling Tyler Kasak for the spot at 157. So just interesting to see how all this plays out and what, the Army. So, obviously, the first data point is going to be Oklahoma, who earns the starting spot for Oklahoma But then also, what happens with Drexel after the Army Black Knight invite? How does that change things, if at all? Does the Army Black Knight change things, or does it solidify things? I think that's the big question mark there. But as we know, we've talked about it before. You go over to a lot of Cael Sanderson's press conferences, T. Frank, you've heard him talk about it before. Just because something looks like it's the way it's going to be early in the year does not mean it's going to be how Penn State ends the season. So that's always the thing to keep in mind. It may look cemented and it may be cemented, but these guys are good at what they do for a reason. They win a lot because they're good at what they do. And sometimes the method to the madness is not always as maybe evident as people want it to be, but it works. And that's really what matters to this Penn State wrestling program. And they'll keep doing what they do because of it. And it may lead to things looking one way in October and November, and then look differently come January and February.
Yep, and we'll be covering it. We'll have Cael Sanderson's press conferences here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel, so you can subscribe here, like the video, all that stuff to help us grow our wrestling coverage and make sure that you get all what you want out of the Nittany Lions' most successful program on campus among sports and general people pursuing championships, like in any facet of the Nittany Lions ecosphere. So, Greg, appreciate you being here on the show. We're going to be more regular, obviously, as we get closer to the season with the Penn State Wrestling Show. A lot of stuff going on, pulling a lot of double duties here for Greg, so appreciate him always doing this on the off-season, regular season, preseason, bringing you Penn State wrestling content over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. For Greg Pickle, I'm Thomas Ryan Carr. We'll talk to you next time.